Awesome. Cool.
Thank you so much for joining us today, Leah.
Yeah, I'm glad to be here.
I've listened to your podcast, and I love what you and Melissa are doing with the Momversation.
Thank you.
So this is a little different. The way we host our IG Live is we'll either have specialists come on, or moms themselves, or companies that are really aligned with providing the perinatal market's value and making parenting easier. So with other moms, we just like to host it as a coffee talk. And I was listening back to a couple of the episodes you did around expectations and breastfeeding.
Yeah.
I thought today's topic could kind of be like 5 things every mom should know before giving birth. And with that, I'll give the floor to you to introduce yourself as Leah from the Momversation.
Awesome. Thank you. Hi. Yes, I'm Leah Wrisley. I'm a co-host of the Momversation Podcast. My co-host is Melissa Statler, and she hopefully is watching. Hi, Melly. We couldn't be here together, unfortunately, so I'm going to represent the whole team. But yeah, we started the podcast about a year ago, actually, like this week. And it kind of just started as, well, I was trying to start like a mom's group in my community because I really felt like that was something I was lacking. And that's something we can talk about maybe in our list of 5 things that moms should know, because community is a really big one. Surrounding yourself with people who are supportive, finding other moms. And I thought it would be cute to call it the Momversation, but that didn't go very well. It wasn't super successful, which was disappointing. But then a couple months later, I was talking with Melissa, who had a little girl that was, I think at the time, about 9 months old. And I had known from conversations with her and also watching her Instagram life that she had gone through a lot of challenges at the beginning, and she was very open about sharing what her motherhood experience was like. And so I thought that could be kind of a place to get started with the podcast idea. I have I am not very technologically smart. And I knew that Melissa had some background in that. And she also told me that she was going to be a guest on a podcast, which is called the Birthful Podcast. And so if you haven't already listened to Melissa's episode on that podcast, it's a good one. She kind of went through her breastfeeding journey and told that story. And so just knowing that she already had some experience with being invited on someone else's show, I thought, well, maybe she'll do this with me. So I just kind of mentioned it casually, and she was like, yeah, let's do it. Let's start a podcast. So she kind of did all the work. I just had the idea, and she figured out what we needed to do to get it started. And then, yeah, we did it last February was our first episode release, and we've done 1 episode every week for the most part for about a year, which has it's been a crazy, wonderful experience, but definitely challenging. Both of us have been either postpartum or pregnant the entire time. So it's been a lot, but it's been really good.
Well, you hit on some really awesome points. Well, congratulations on your
Thanks.
and Melissa, we'll have to get on too at some point. I can't wait to meet you virtually. So I'm just guessing in the past year, with at least 2 different guests that you've hosted, that you can definitely provide some value, and you probably learned so much going through this experience as moms yourself, of balancing and managing professional priorities. And so what do you think is really the first thing that you would have known running their own company?
Yeah, so, okay, let's see. I'm going to look at our list and see what the most important thing is. And I think just in general, when you are going into birth and going into being postpartum and just motherhood in general, I think the most important thing would be to trust yourself and listen to your instincts, which is true for lots of different areas of life. But it's not something that we're always taught how to do as women. We are often told not to listen to our bodies and ourselves and our instincts, and not trust ourselves and second guess ourselves and look to outside opinions and resources, rather than sort of going into what Glennon Doyle calls our knowing. We have a knowing inside of us. We know what we need, and we know how to trust ourselves, but we don't we're not really given that opportunity very often. And so I think that's probably the number one thing, is learn how to trust yourself and listen to those instincts, and then also ask the same thing of other people. We've had several birth doulas on to talk about the birth experience for women, and how a lot of times they don't feel comfortable sharing their desires during birth, or knowing how to ask care providers for more information that they might need when they're going into birth. And so I think that's a big one. If you are an expectant mom, try to figure out what that looks like for you and how to trust yourself. And that's also true for, like you said, when you are pursuing an endeavor outside of motherhood, whether that's a career or starting a business or a project like we have, which is our podcast. You kind of have to just know when what your own boundaries are. Yeah.
Oh, I love that, actually, as being like the first overarching thing to know. Because I just want to echo, like, in our research with the natural nipple, when we were number one barriers to breastfeeding were, we broke it down into psychosocial problems, as well as, physical issues that we can actually address with a product.
Mm-hmm.
So that's why we started the natural nipple, to mitigate the problem with standard bottles, made the shape, feel, and flow more similar to mom.
Mm-hmm.
96% of parents, when we redid this survey at the height of the pandemic, just really felt as if they didn't have support from their community or healthcare provider. And so I think that really echoes the importance of this first point about trusting yourself. And sometimes, like, really all we need is just to have, like, a sounding board, like, right? And have a little bit of confirmation come back from the right place, whether it be in that's experienced the same problem. And then from a clinical perspective, I really want to emphasize how important and critical that is to express your needs, like, to healthcare providers. It doesn't have to be scientifically accurate. You're not expected to know everything. It's so much as a clinician. So my background, I'm a nurse practitioner. I specialized in primary care and women's health, and the PhD I was working on was focused on the gut microbiome. But in the clinical setting, I see so often that people are just very trusting of whoever's taking care of them, and so they don't express their needs. And in reality, people are just, nurses in particular, are very overburdened in terms of patient ratios. So the reality is they're going to do whatever is fastest for them. Unless they're actually saying, hey, like, does this nipple shield actually fit right? Or can like get into the squatting position before, get on that yoga ball before we go within my hips? It's just not going to be offered. So I resound just that confidence to voice your opinion and trust yourself, regardless if you know it's right or not.
Right. Yes, definitely. And that's something that, like, a lot of us don't know what we're going to need or what we might possibly need. And that's another thing, is just kind of going along with whatever the next right thing is for you. Like, I'm glad you mentioned the nipple shield. That was something that Melissa had trouble with, is that the hospital provided them for her when she first started breastfeeding, because that was something that she needed. When her daughter was born, she was having a lot of trouble with her latch, and so they had some lactation support come in and help them, and taught them how to do some exercises for helping her with her tongue. And then for Melissa, she needed the nipple shields, but they gave her the wrong size. And then she went home and was frustrated and struggling with it. And as a new mom, like, you don't really know what the problem is, but you know that there is a problem. And so you have to try to figure out how to fix the problem and voice your needs. And she ended up using some lactation support, like a virtual 24/7 support that was available to her. And she said it was incredibly helpful. And I know that's something that you guys provide, your company provides. And so I wanted to touch on that as well, because I know that she really benefited from that. And especially right now with the pandemic and not really being able to get all the services provided that we usually can, having that virtual support is incredible.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for pointing that out. And
Yeah.
I think what kind of like sets us apart from other telehealth groups that are made for moms is our group of clinicians is actually primary care providers. And I think why that's important is we have a very holistic triage form and intake. So you might think, oh, I'm just not producing enough milk. And so you might self-select, for instance, that you need to see a lactation consultant. Versus like when we do this holistic intake, we can actually look and see your medical history, and perhaps you actually just have out of control blood sugar, and you have diabetes that hasn't ever been managed. So we can actually
Mm.
only prevent chronic complications by getting to the root of your problem, but also protect the front line as well. By triaging, do you really need to go into urgent care for this issue, or is this something we can just, we've worked with moms for hours until they actually get a successful latch, like just like we're talking
Mm-hmm.
with
Right.
little techniques. And so um, I just wanted to point out, aside from our clinical telehealth visits, a really great free resource for women is the Social Mama app, which is totally like easy to join. You download it on Android or iOS. I love
Mm-hmm.
you can post a question to a forum and actually have just other moms respond, or if it's a medical question, have a pool of experts that can provide sort of medical navigation, like you're talking about.
Right.
Just don't know where to start.
Right. That's incredible. That's wonderful. That's another thing I love about this podcast is that I've learned so many different resources that are out there for moms that I had no idea really existed. That's going back to what we were saying about having a community. You can have people that are a part of your community that you don't necessarily know personally, but are resources for you. Like we've had a sleep consultant on, which is a big one. Like sleep is one of the hardest parts of having an infant because you don't get any sleep unless you have help with figuring out what that can look like for you. So sleep consultants and we have had postpartum doulas on. We had a postpartum doula come on the show, which I didn't know existed, and I wish that I had known about that when I was having my babies. There's a lot of support out there, so I'm glad that you mentioned that app too. I'll have to look into that.
Yeah. Oh, well, that's really curious for me because I'm like, what is a postpartum doula? Do we want to
Yeah,
our next thing we wish we knew
sure.
for birth? Okay.
Yeah, sure. That's great. Yeah, so a postpartum doula, if you want to listen to the episode, I think it's called the fourth trimester, thriving in the fourth trimester. Um, so a pregnancy is 3 trimesters. We break it into 3 different sections, and then the first 3 months of an infant's life are considered the fourth trimester, which is kind of the perfect name for it because it really does feel like extended pregnancy. Like the baby really can't be separated from you for very long. They have to nurse frequently or feed frequently. They're not sleeping very well. They just kind of are still in their sort of like fetal patterns of living, and they really need you to be close with them. And they like when my kids were that little, they were just always on me. They were in like a little pouch or a wrap or something all the time. So it really did feel like I was just still pregnant. um, and that time is a really special and challenging time. And so a postpartum doula comes in and they're there to support you with whatever you need. So some of the services that they provide are like cooking meals for a new mom and providing nutritional support. So they have a lot of knowledge about like what a new mom should be eating to support milk supply and help them with recovery from birth. And they will also be there to give you water or help you out with breastfeeding. A lot of them also have some training in like lactation consulting. So they'll be there for that sort of stuff. They can also be there to just be the one that holds the baby in the baby carrier while you take a nap or a shower or relax or do whatever you need to do. They can also be there for like emotional support to listen to your birth story and help you process that trauma if you need to, or just be an extra person there to kind of help you through because it is a very sensitive time and there's a lot of hormones and emotions and challenges that come up in those first couple months.
I am so happy that we have you on today because in all of my journey doing this research the last 3 years, I've actually never heard of a postpartum doula either. And
Yeah.
I really want to echo on the importance of what you said about coming in for sort of nutritional support as well.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
If it's okay with you, I'll mention like what we
Yeah.
found in the United States with the National Science Foundation grant after going out and surveying to find out what the barriers to breastfeeding are. The psychosocial was really the biggest thing, as we mentioned. And I thought it was really important to figure out what countries who have the best breastfeeding rates in the world. So Nepal, according to the World Health Organization,
Interesting.
has the best rates. They have the best rates to get to 6 months of exclusive feeding as well as 2 years of continuing breastfeeding. And so I went out and I did the same exact research we did in the States there. And what I thought was really interesting is from a cultural perspective, the main difference is that you have this expectation as a societal norm that your neighbors or, you know, your partner's family actually take care of you for that first week.
Mm-hmm.
That's already built in. So
Right.
aside from like you're not having to worry about going back to work in that 3 months and
Mm-hmm.
you have people coming and cooking you meals if you don't have a husband and actually like bringing them to your home. The focus is on very nutrient dense foods, so
Mm-hmm.
a lot of omega-6s.
Mm-hmm.
Use a seed called A1 and like their congee, which is like a rice and a fatty, like very filling.
Mm.
So, yeah, I just wanted to touch on that because that is something so different from
Right.
our society to theirs.
Yes. Right. Yeah. I'm glad you mentioned that because that is it's a cultural, I would say, a problem with how we treat postpartum women. Like we don't necessarily build that into the way that we just sort of naturally support new moms. And the fact that a postpartum doula exists is amazing, but it's also a little bit sad that it has to be like a profession rather than something that we're just naturally doing for moms. And figuring out how to support them because like in the US, a lot of women have to go back to work at 6 weeks or maybe even sooner, some of them. And we kind of expect that to just happen. And we don't provide the amount of time for that recovery and also the infant mother bonding that is really necessary. So
Yeah,
I definitely think there's a lot to learn from some of those other cultures that do support new moms in that way.
exactly. And another thing that I just want to echo there is that skin to skin and that infant.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
You mentioned how this can be a very testing period. It's like a brand.
Mm-hmm.
Your hormones are already totally in a different place.
Yeah.
And so that skin to skin is not only crucial for regulating your own oxytocin levels, which help you bond, which help curb postpartum depression. But
Mm-hmm.
that skin to skin is cultivating that baby biome, which is training
Mm-hmm.
them in terms of how to interact with the environment, promoting its neurological development. And what I found was so challenging, the women that we've surveyed, was, you know, you're pumping all of a sudden at 6, you have to go back to work. So you're being forced to introduce the standard bottle. And
Mm-hmm.
what was described is, you know, a baby often gets used to that faster flow. Like, no one had ever studied maternal lactation averages over the first year and been like, let's make this the benchmark for our product. Like, let's at least
Mm.
try to make these rates, you know, match. So there's seamless breast to bottle feeding. You don't get that nipple confusion.
Mm-hmm.
So that's really what inspired me. Like,
Yeah.
our listeners, like, what does the natural nipple have to do they're talking about? That's what we're really trying to address, is that primary
Right.
there.
That's wonderful because we do have we have the ability to research all of this and learn about it and make bottle feeding that much better. And I think that it's unfortunate that bottle feeding does kind of get a bad rep sometimes because we haven't taken the steps and made the effort that you're making to create a more natural experience for mom and baby with that. So I'm really excited to be a part of this new project. I'm really glad that this is happening.
Thanks. Yeah, I was really scratching my head for some time because I'm like, the infant feeding industry is like 200 years old. Like we've been trying to, back in France, but it was like a cultural norm then for women to stay at home and like not even go out in public the first 6 months. Like obviously
Right.
in a very different society where we're balancing competing priorities and everyone wants to be a great mom and also like have a career that's important for some people. And so, or just provide like sustenance for your family,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And so if standard bottles were creating that pain point and the CEOs were all men who had never really cared to disrupt
Mm-hmm.
33-cent silicone nipple that has insane
Right.
problems and just the technology wasn't developed yet to actually
Mm-hmm.
3D scan breasts. Okay, let's create the molds from that and do the maternal lactation data collection and
Mm-hmm.
let women pick like what is the shape that's closest to them and then be sent a subscription that actually matches the growing baby's demand.
Right.
And I'm really excited just to like pepper in. So doing all of the data collection, like I mentioned, in the US and then in Nepal, and then doing the 3D scanning and the flow rate data. This has taken 3 years. Like February, our anniversary is in 6 days.
Oh, cool.
Our 3 year anniversary. And so, to actually see the results of our beta testing with real women this last,
Mm-hmm.
and that it's actually like giving them freedom to feed their baby,
Mm-hmm.
give them some of their life back, it's like I could not be happier. I actually said like I can die happy now, but no, I really want it to like reach more people. And
Right.
from a clinical standpoint, I just thought it was really frustrating because we kind of look the other way. We're like, oh, don't give a bottle because we know bottles are the standard problem, but we're
Mm-hmm.
not addressing the fact that we're introduced to it and that like
Mm-hmm.
90% of women have to. So
Right.
we need to make something that disrupts that industry, which is I'm really excited to launch with that.
Yeah. Yeah, that's great. We had an episode about bottle feeding and how there's just so much stigma around it. And so knowing that there is an option that can be more, I don't know, everything that you've said just feels very empowering. Like this is something that is a women-run project. Like this is something that is for women and by women and is going to benefit women and not necessarily be something that is I guess seen so negatively because so many my moms, like you said, need to use bottles, and to make it a better experience for everyone is like the best thing I can think of.
Yeah, and also just remove some of that stigma. Like that's what I really appreciate about your podcast, The Momversation, is because we're not getting on these like polar sides of,
Mm-hmm.
you know, breastfeeding only or bottle
Right.
only. Like, let's just talk about the nature and the reality of what real women are going through and how can we make parenting easier and be inclusive
Mm-hmm.
and very accepting of every stage of that journey.
Right.
Um, so kind of like in that vein, what do you think
Mm-hmm.
is the third thing that you wish you knew before you gave birth?
Um, I guess I would say we're touching on so many things now. I'm thinking of more beyond my list. um, One thing that Melissa and I, as we were brainstorming some of the things that we wish we knew, is that your own journey is your own, and you can really embrace that. And I think that it's easy to get caught up in like the right way to be a mom, because we are seeing a lot of things on social media, and we have other generations telling us what it looks like to be a mom, and we see people having different experiences from us, and we're just flailing and not sure, like, are we doing this the right way, or is there a different way I could be doing it? Am I scarring my children by, we were joking the other day about like, am I doing the wrong thing by having the wrong DockATot like stage for them instead of doing a DockATot? Am I going straight to the crib and that's going to be a problem for them? Like, no, it's fine. And something that I've learned from this podcast is that there are a lot of different ways to be a mom and experience being a mom. And so I think my goal, at least from this, is for women to listen to the podcast and realize, like, not only, oh, me too, I'm experiencing that too, and wow, I thought I was alone and someone else is having the same experience, but also, wow, I didn't realize that somebody else could have that experience as a mom. So we've had women on that, we have a guest who's actually expecting her daughter in, I think, on Valentine's Day. So she's due very soon. And she is a single mother by choice. So she decided that she didn't want to wait to find a life partner to have children. She wanted to just become a mother on her own. And so that was a route to becoming a mom that I hadn't really considered before. We had, on Monday, we have an episode coming out that is a surrogate speaking about her surrogate journey and how she has helped families become families when they were struggling with fertility issues. So that's another way to become a parent. Like, there's just so many different experiences that we can have. And they're all so valid. And that's what I love about this podcast, is being able to validate all of these women's experiences and also learn about them. And my own understanding of what it means to be a mom has been expanded beyond what I could have imagined. And it has really helped me, I think, empathize more with all of these other mothers that I'm interacting with.
Yeah, I love that. And I think that is such a critical point that is applicable, I mean, not only to motherhood, but just essentially shedding expectations, right? I don't know if you've read the book Lean In by Sheryl Sandberg. She was the COO, I believe, either at Google. I have to fact check myself. Anyway, I'm just like loving the content because she's talking about how like we made a lot of progress from the 50s to 2000 in terms of more equality for women in the workplace, but how some things like were never brought up or brought to board members' attention in terms of like pregnant spots until there was a woman at the top who had to actually do the walk at 9 months old, or excuse me, 9 months pregnant in the office. And just how challenging that was. And really, like, the theme so far is we need to keep pushing for more equality. And that doesn't just mean, like, board seats or, like, more women. So it just means, like, looking at partnerships that are more supportive as well. Having a mother is a very important thing to and that might not be a part of every woman's journey, but learning to balance that with, you know, your own unique personal goals and really honoring that within yourself is something that I think that having open conversations like this can make you feel more inspired to push for. And also because like the problem that she was addressing is where we're at now is a lot more women, like 60% are getting like masters and PhDs, but then kind of stepping back and stepping away from leadership roles because it also is, they want to do both. It's also important for them to have them, but the struggle that they're having is inside of the home. They're not having shared support in terms of care of the kids or cooking. Really figuring out how to navigate that and honoring, like I think that's so beautiful. The woman you mentioned that's due on Valentine's decided, oh, this is important to me. It doesn't what norm I should fit into or role I should have. And I think featuring more anecdotal experiences like that is really important.
Yeah, absolutely. And it shows other moms that whatever they're experiencing is also valid, even though it's different. Like your experience as a mom is also just as valid and just as empowering. Yeah. And I'm glad that you mentioned partnerships, because that could maybe lead us into another thing I had written down as an idea to talk about, which is communicating your needs and asking for help, which does not come very naturally to a lot of us. Like, I mean, the first step is like recognizing that you have needs and trying to figure out what those needs are, and remembering that it's okay to have them, and then being able to communicate them and ask for help from your partner and from your community, from whoever is there supporting you. Definitely making that line of communication stay open can be very challenging, but is so, so crucial. I think a lot of women that are struggling with postpartum depression and anxiety and other mood disorders don't always feel like they can communicate their needs or feel like their needs will be heard. And so they feel, I think, silenced in that. But to find it within yourself to ask for what you need is like the best thing you can do. And that's not something that I was very good about doing with my first postpartum experience. Excuse me. I really struggled a lot with postpartum depression with my first son. Maybe like the first year, it was a long time of really feeling like I was struggling and not sure what I was doing and not sure how to ask for help and not sure that, and feeling like it was all on me. Like, I'm the mom, so I should be doing everything and I should be the one to take on all of the weight of this job. And that's not true. Like, I could have asked for more help and I could have expressed myself better. So then with my second son, I still struggled quite a bit emotionally, but I felt a little bit more comfortable asking for help and expressing my needs. I sought out therapy, and I reached out to my parents more for help, and also got a lot better at communicating with my partner about how I was feeling and what I felt like I needed. And I know it can be really hard and really scary, but that's a big one for new moms, is you have to be able to communicate those needs, especially when you're struggling.
Exactly. So I'm a mom myself. I'm just echoing like what you're saying is challenging because it applies to so many other things, right? And I think that what you're saying in terms of getting in touch with your needs first and then learning how to communicate them clearly is pivot. Like, once you start getting on that bicycle and riding it, easier and easier, and in every kind of relationship that you have.
Yeah.
But I think it's something that's even further compounded in motherhood because you really do struggle to set aside any time alone for yourself, which is actually crucial if you are going to get in touch with your own needs. So just, I think even if you don't know what's wrong, you just feel overwhelmed or like something, the very first thing you can ask for is just 30 minutes a day where you can hand off the baby to someone, whether it's a partner, a friend, you get a trusted nanny. Like, just make that time for you, and know that it's not selfish. Know that it's actually the best thing that you could, like, so overuse the thing about put on your oxygen mask.
Oh, yeah.
But that you can't possibly be the best mom that you want to be if you're unable to get in touch with your own needs and then be able to care about them. And if I can just pepper in something that has really helped me personally with that tip, is I think what holds a lot of people back from expressing their needs is an anticipation of the worst possible outcome. Is this going to start an argument? Is this going to, was that part of it for you? Like, you just didn't want to rock the boat, or like what was back from sharing your needs?
Yeah, I think that's a big part of it. It can be hard to feel like, okay, if I express my needs, then like, what if it becomes sort of like not a power struggle, I don't know what the word I'm looking for, but like a competition between like, well, I'm not sleeping either, and like, I'm the one who goes to work every day and you're home all day, and like trying to make it into this like competitive issue, which for me, like my partner is not that way at all. So I don't know why I would be afraid of that. But the other thing is, I think that we kind of portray motherhood as something that has to be like we sort of worship like the super mom, like the mom that does everything and she does it all on her own and she does it while she's looking great, and we want to be that way and we want to be seen that way as this like high achieving mother who's able to just handle everything by herself, which is kind of ridiculous and doesn't actually exist. So I think there's also this sort of standard that we hold ourselves to that we want to live up to, even though it's very unrealistic and not very helpful. And I also think that we assume that mothers are just self-sacrificing, and just from my conversations recently with new moms, I think that a lot of us saw our own moms playing the role of just being the giver all the time and not necessarily taking care of themselves. And so we assume that we should be doing that as well. But we're learning that that's not very healthy, and it's not something that we can sustain for a long time. And actually taking care of ourselves, like you said, makes us that much better for our children and for our partners and for everyone else in our lives. And it also teaches our children that we are human and we need things.
Yeah.
We need to go to the bathroom alone. We need to shower. We need to drink water. We need to have time on our own. We need to have intimacy with our partners. Like all of those things, we need to have careers that feed our souls rather than just pouring our entire selves into motherhood all the time. And I think that that's something I'm trying to hold on to, is that like I need to teach my sons that I'm a human. I'm not just their mom. I am a separate person from them, and I have goals and desires and things that fuel me beyond just being their mother, which is amazing, and I love being their mom, and I want to be their mom. But I'm more than that.
Yes, I love that. And we have a comment from one of our Milky Mama. She's just resounding, taking care of ourselves really does fuel our energy and positive daily routine. And so, yeah, I think that you're shedding your self-perceived role and this of super mama, and I think it kind of coincides with a bit of perfectionism too. Yes, because you're totally right. Like you mentioned, you have a great partner who would help if you like you have to get rid of this sort of identity that you have to handle everything on your certain way. And I think what's really been an awesome tool that I'm trying to employ more often is, approach any conversation or interaction, whether it be in interpersonal relationships with friends or your partner, to professional partnerships where I'm like reaching for favor. So often I will expect like, okay, well, this is what they could say, so I need to prepare for the worst, and I need to like lower my expectation here. Like I totally have changed that for 2021, and I'm approaching every conversation just expecting the best possible outcome. You actually change your energy and the vibe that you bring when you are like, yep, it's going to go great and it's going to go. And you know what? If not, it's just a mini little experiment, and we iterate and we learn and we adapt from that point.
Yes, I think that's a great piece of advice. And actually, that's something that I started practicing when going into both of my births, because it was the natural response for me as I started to envision what my birth was going to look like, was to go to that like worst case scenario place and like, oh no, what if everything goes horribly? Or like, what if we don't make it to the hospital on time? Or what if I have to be rushed into an emergency C-section? And all of these like big dramatic things where it would like play out in this graphic way. And then I realized I'm just putting myself into this bad mental space rather than maybe I should actively try to imagine the best case scenario, like everything goes smoothly and it is a wonderful experience for me and my babies are healthy and everything's fine, and try to envision what that could look like. And then that really helped me go into birth feeling more confident and feeling less anxious. And anxiety really doesn't serve us any purpose, really. And Yeah, I think that's another piece of advice that I would give moms is try to envision the best thing. And even if things do go horribly, like they go horribly and you adjust as you go. Like you figure out how to manage each next step, which is kind of how it works, like you were saying, with all of motherhood. Like you can't ever plan for everything. That's another thing we wrote down is not everything will go as planned. Your
Yeah.
birth plan might not be exactly how you envisioned it. Your living situation might not be exactly right. Like a global pandemic may happen in the middle of your pregnancy, which is what happened to me. Like not something I was expecting at all. But not everything goes to plan. And so you really do have to just be flexible and kind of take it one step at a time and realize that it's all just sort of out of your control. As much as you want to be in control, there are certain things that are not, and you have to accept that as a mom.
I think that is such a great final point, is just know that not everything will go as planned and learn to accept and embrace that. And it doesn't mean that it's wrong to plan or be prepared, but kind of like we both touched on, like just changing your expectation and your paradigm when you're planning
Mm-hmm.
from a place of like, yep, we're going to plan for the best, but also
Right.
just know that it may not go that way. And that's,
Mm-hmm.
and
Yes.
And so, can you, like, as we wrap up here this last couple of minutes, just talk to me a little bit about how that shifted for you with your second birth when you sort
Mm-hmm.
of approached your birth plan with more of a positive expectation?
Yeah. I think it did help that I had a positive experience the first time. If I'm being honest, though, I really do feel like the podcast and talking to other moms and talking to doulas um, helped me to come into that like empowered state and realize that like I do, as much as things will be out of my control, I do have some say in how this goes. And I felt a lot more confident being the mom. Like I am the one who is doing this and I can do this. Um, and that was kind of my mantra was I can do this and my body is my friend. And I just said that to myself over and over. And yeah, I think that sort of positive manifestation of like, this is what's going to happen. Um, but also, yeah, like you said, kind of letting go of expectations a little bit. I don't know. I don't feel like I succinctly said any of that very well. But yeah, I think that with having a second baby, whether it's going into birth or going into postpartum, just knowing that like I did my best last time and I can do my best this time, and you kind of like roll with the punches as you go. And I think also embracing all of the other things that we talked about today, like welcoming your community in and being patient with yourself and communicating your needs, all of those things kind of go along with that sort of sentiment of rolling with the punches, so to speak.
No, I love it. I think that today was just such a like vibrant conversation, like
Good. Thank you.
about everything in terms of like looking forward to the birthing process to like what comes after. And
Mm-hmm.
summarize, our first point that you wish before giving birth was just trust yourself. Like,
Mm-hmm.
no, we have this gut intuition, and I think a lot of it also has to do with the microbes that are in there and
Mm-hmm.
dealing with them as we're learning more about the gut microbiome. But it's a real neuronal sort of network that
Mm-hmm.
can lean back, and nobody has all of the insights from your own personal experience that you do. And
Mm-hmm.
And so the second point that you touched on was know that postpartum doulas exist for support.
Yeah.
And also
Yeah.
how integral that is for success, and especially in cultures that are doing the absolute best in the world
Mm-hmm.
for supporting women through the breastfeeding journey. And the third thing we hit on was really like shed expectations, because your journey is totally your own, and it's okay. However, if you decide to have a baby by yourself, or if you decide to adopt, or if you decide to be a stay-at-home mom, or if you just
Mm-hmm.
be a CEO, like it's all okay.
Right.
And you can find other people that are in a similar path. And I think that finding that support is, like you mentioned, kind of the silence that you sat in your postpartum depression, and in reality, so many people are going through the same thing. So many new moms are feeling that exact. You also mentioned something so crucial, which I love this point, was like get in touch with your needs, because you have to do to communicate them. So blocking some time every day and just making it mandatory. Like, as important as it is for your baby to come to you to feed and for you to nourish them, you have to nourish yourself.
Yep.
Time. And then I love this point of, you know, you can anticipate the best in every encounter, but just know that not everything is going to go as planned. And when I was talking a little bit about the research in Nepal, I was so excited to meet their president of the breastfeeding forum. And I'm thinking he's gonna like unveil all of these amazing tips about how this country to reach this this goal. But really, he was just a little flustered with having to fight industry players like formula companies out of the hospital. Really, like, we just circled around. It was so interesting because he's like in his late 50s, and I'm a younger researcher that's not a mom, but is so passionate about the same thing. And he was like, you know, we agreed, like, let's just be a better industry player. Let's just create a product that's not the problem, like standard bottles are right now.
Right.
And then he was also talking about how important that what we call it is the biology to believe it. And so hit on two awesome mantras in that last point, which is like, I can do this and my body is my friend. And that is actually the truth. Like, evolutionarily, you know, you were designed for this, and you can do it. And our physiology actually changes with the belief of the expectation, you know? You're actually able to regulate those stress hormones and decrease cortisol levels when you latch onto a mantra like that. And that is so important for bonding.
Yeah.
So I think if there's anything, it's like key takeaway, just get yourself around the kind of people that help you get into that state. Cultivate your tribe like you're doing with the Momversation. And you know, reach out, like get on Social Mama, the free app.
Yeah.
We're always here on the Natural Nipple. You can schedule a telehealth visit if you feel like your question is more medical related. But we also do directly connect you if we feel like the root of the problem is really just need someone to talk to and you need a therapist. We can refer to resources for that too. So Leah, I just want to say thank you. We ran
thank you so much.
Loved how today was going, and I wanted the conversation to keep flowing freely.
Well, thank you so much. I'm glad to be on the other side of this. I'm usually hosting, and so it was kind of fun to be a guest. It was a little nerve-wracking, but I think it went okay. So thank you so much for inviting us. And I want to give one more shout out to Melissa, my co-host. I wish that we could have done it together, but yeah, she's been really wonderful to let me come on and speak for us. And I'm really glad we got a chance to chat a little bit. And I learned so much more about your company, and that's really exciting. We're really glad to be supporting you guys.
Thank you so much. Yeah,
thank you.
Looking forward to getting on and having a conversation with you guys, and getting to meet Melissa as well. And just so you know, what we'll do